If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning into Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we will be exploring the Sabbat, the Cainites who pay no attention to the six traditions and embrace their inner beast. We will also explore their origins, motives, and what sort of cultures these kindred live. So you had a run-in with the Sabbat, eh? A different breed of kindred, aren't they? Oh, but you must never call them that. They hate that word. After all, kindred is a Camarilla invention. They are very proud of their lineage. They wear their vampiric nature on their chest, still using the ancient word Cainite to describe what they are. Unlike the Camarilla and the Anarchs to an extent, the Sabbat believe in the antediluvians and Caine. Under the guise of the Sword of Caine, they believe they will be the army Caine will use to destroy the antediluvians once Gehenna arrives. What is Gehenna? In short, it is the vampiric apocalypse. According to Nodist mythology, Nodists being those who study and worship the Book of Nod, which is the Cainite Bible, Gehenna is when the antediluvians will rise from their slumber and devour their descendants. Whether that is something for you to believe and be concerned about is entirely down to you. As for I like to believe there is some element of truth behind it. That being said, mortal society has their own end-of-day panics and worries and paranoia, and to an extent, they carry over into Cainite tradition. Two growing movements made these Cainites define their ideologies during the Dark Ages. The first came from the threat of a group of merciless hunters from the Roman Catholic Church called the Inquisition, who were, and still are to an extent, able to smite us to ash with nothing but their faith alone. Terrified, elders reacted by eagerly sacrificing the younger Cainites, which are known as neonates, as a means of protection. This ignited the first Anarch revolt, where large numbers of younger vampires rebelled against their elders, for they no longer wished to be manipulated by the older Cainites. There were, of course, some who wished that power for themselves. The founders-to-be, the Vedru Hardestat and the Tremere Councillor Melinda, recognized the need for a unified front. It is said they banded together with several of their most trusted childhood servants for a meeting in Vienna to agree upon a joint task force of sorts to use against the Anarchs, and names whose origins lie with such elders. And thus the Camarilla was born at around about 1435 AD, when the founders began to openly rally and support vampires from the dangers of newly formed Anarchs, the Assamites, and the plentiful mobs of dangerous mortals. It would be some 60 years before a peace agreement between the leaders of the Camarilla, the Anarchs, and the Assamites were made. This was known as the Convention of Thorns, which marked the end of the first Anarch revolt and the birth of the Camarilla as it is known today. Those who didn't accept the terms would form the Sabbat, a sect that believed they should enslave mortals and not hide their true bestial natures. The two clans that would lead the Sabbat were clans La Sombra and clan Shemitzi, who have apparently destroyed their antediluvian founders. The Shemitzi, who have never really wanted to acknowledge their human natures and mostly practiced the path of metamorphosis through their Visagiu discipline, refused to submit their lands to their bitter rivals, clan Tremere. As for the La Sombra, they had invested too much in the revolt to surrender their success to the elders of other clans. They attended the Convention of Thorns to negotiate, not to surrender. Members of both clans, in addition to members of the other clans, met at the island of Majorca and made their own negotiations. Notable names include Malkavian Vasantacina, the Tremere Goretrix, and the Vedru Dominique Torraine, who would become the first anti-tribu of their clans. The Sabbat would live in the wilderness, the outskirts of towns and cities, practice blood-bounding and the breaking of thereof called Valordery, and unite their pack members together. With the Anarchs and the Camarilla now pretending to be human, the Sabbat were the obvious choices for the Inquisition to focus their extermination of. Despite open protests against it as a tool of the antediluvians, the Sabbat elders soon realised the worth of secrecy in the modern Knights and the real danger of being wiped out. They sought to accommodate to these circumstances without pretending to be human. No doubt you know of the bitter rivalry between the Camarilla elders and the Anarch neonates. They have been at each other's throats since the formation of each sect. Of course, they have also fought against the Sabbat on many occasions, but the Sabbat have had 3 civil wars to date, in addition to the fights against the Camarilla. The first began in North America around the time of the American Revolution, where young La Sombra and Shemitzi in the New World turned against one another in competition over mortal resources. The second took place in Mexico and Canada during the 19th century, following the assassination of Regent Gorchist, resulting in more fighting between the clan heads, Clan Sombra and Shemitzi. The third and final Sabbat civil war was caused by bourgeois anti-tribu in New York, who attempted to overthrow the La Sombra and Shemitzi that had dominated the sect since its inception. This war was settled by diplomacy, as the La Sombra and Shemitzi finally recognized the anti-tribu Cainites as equals within the sect. This was all fronted by the cative anti-tribu Joseph Panda. The cative were granted a position as an honorary clan within the sect, the Pandas. I spoke once or twice of the Sabbat Code of Conduct, the Code of Milan, and I thought it would be worthwhile going through it with you. You may have to recite it should you be captured by them, to show that you are a true member of the Sabbat. Or you may wish to join them sometime in the near future, for which I shan't judge you, for now. After all, we are all independent in the modern Knights now, aren't we? Number 1. The Sabbat shall remain united in its support of the sect's regent. If necessary, a new regent shall be elected. The regent shall support relief from tyranny, granting all Sabbat freedom. Number 2. All Sabbat shall do their best to serve their leaders as long as said leaders serve the will of the regent. Number 3. All Sabbat shall faithfully observe all the Auctoritas Praetae. All Sabbat shall keep their word of honour to one another, is number 4. Number 5 states all Sabbat shall treat their peers fairly and equally, upholding the strength and unity of the Sabbat. If necessary, they shall provide for the needs of their brethren. Number 6. All Sabbat must put the good of the sect and the race of the Cainites before their own personal needs, despite all costs. Number 7 states that those who are not honourable under this code will be considered less than equal and therefore unworthy of assistance. Number 8 reads, As it has always been, so shall it always be. The Lex Talonius shall be the model for the undying justice by which all Sabbat shall abide. As a reminder, the Lex Talonius is the process of a blood hunt, the one legal circumstance, in Camarilla tradition at least, that allows one to go through the act of diablerie. Number 9. All Sabbat shall protect one another from the enemies of the sect. Personal enemies shall remain a personal responsibility unless they undermine sect security. The 10th rule of the Code of Milan states that all sect's members shall protect Sabbat territory from all other powers. Number 11 states the spirit of freedom shall be the fundamental principle of the sect. All Sabbat shall expect and demand freedom from their leaders. Number 12. The ritus of monomacy shall be used to settle disputes among all Sabbat. Number 13. All Sabbat shall support the Black Hand. The last 3 are additions that have been made over the years. Number 14 states that all Sabbat have the right to monitor the behaviour and activities of their fellow sect members in order to maintain freedom and security. Number 15 states that all Sabbat possess the right to call a council of their peers and immediate leaders. And finally, Number 16 states that all Sabbat shall act against sect members who've used the powers and the authority of the Sabbat has given them for personal gain at the expense of the Sabbat. Action shall be taken only through the accepted means, approved by a quorum of precept. At this point you must be thinking one of 2 things, or perhaps both of them. The first point is that the Sabbat are a bunch of hypocrites. The second one, what do all these various terms mean? Black Hand. Reads, eh? Don't worry, I shall expand upon some of these for you now. The Rite are Sabbat rituals, the most common of which I've already mentioned, the Valordery, which is really their take on the blood bond, whereas the blood bond in Camarilla and Anarch society is used to, hey neonate, fancy being my slave? The Valordery here is used for binding pack members together as a sign of trust. We are bound together and I swear loyalty to thee, and vice versa, times 10. Their rituals also participate in a variety of other means. Fire and violence are common themes in their rite, and the rituals involved range from fire dances to ceremonial killing to the corruption of existing games and sports into excuses for violent bloody slaughter. Their unlives are tense and hostile, and the rite allows Cainites to blow off some steam and reconnect with other vampires before heading back down a road towards mistrust and internal conflict. Hurrah! The goal of these rituals is not only to help recreate solidarity among Sabbat vampires, but also to push the boundaries of their vampiric bodies and test the capabilities of war. Whereas most Kindred and the Camarilla tend to operate in groups of 4, a coterie, a Sabbat pack can and usually has up to 10, each one swaying loyalty to one another through the standard blood-sharing rites of the cult, as I've just explained to you. Members are usually bound in a vinculum, a sort of blood bond, created by the blood-sharing ceremonies that I've just gone over with you also. Packs generally occupy communal havens, given the Sabbat's rejection of human morals and its use of artificial loyalties enforced by the vinculium. There is less need for privacy. That said, my contacts have told me they have seemingly given up on their territories, the Sabbat, not my contacts, after the rise of the Second Inquisition and the start of the Gehenna Crusade in the East. The Sabbat are not so picky about who and what they embrace. In fact, they often use mass embraces for a steady supply of shock troopers, usually as a part of some war effort. These new Cainites who don't survive or don't earn the respect of everyone are referred to as false Sabbat. Those who earn their place are the true Sabbat. If anything, the Sabbat is a fractious lot that values personal freedom above everything else. In the chaos of the Sabbat, it is not unlikely to find members of these factions among the packs, though by no means does every member of the Sabbat support one of these given factions. On the far left side of the political spectrum, you have the Loyalists, who see themselves as heirs to the original Anarchs. They believe that the only way to be loyal to the Sabbat is to follow the original principle of the Anarch movement, that all vampires must be free and ultimately responsible for their own actions. They are strongly opposed to the Code of Milan and the Purchase Pact. Next you have the moderates, who are not as radical as the Loyalists. They see the modern Sabbat as clogged with rules and regulations that are in contrast to the original spirit of the Anarch Revolt. They support the Purchase Pact and oppose several tenets of the Code of Milan. The status quo literally seeks to keep things the way they are and work within the current systems, believing that allowing members a looser reign will compromise the secrecy and security of the sect. They support the Purchase Pact and the Code of Milan in its current form. Next is the Orthodoxy, who advocate a strengthening of the religious aspects and the high echelons of the Sabbat, believing that to do otherwise would invite divine ire. They advocate a no-quarters attitude to heretics, as well as a reinforcement of the position of the pact priest over the ductus. Finally, there is the ultra-conservatives, the far-right wing of the sect, who believe that the Gehenna is just around the corner and that the sect must be ready for war. In their eyes, even the revised Code of Milan goes not far enough to unite the sect, and for the sake of Caine, stop looking at me like that. We are still talking about the Sabbat, not the current UK political climate. There are also the Black Hand, who are essentially the Sabbat military, and the Inquisition. Not the same who deem themselves vampire hunters, but the Sabbat Inquisition hunt and purge any demon worshippers. Whether your political stance leans left or right within the Sabbat, or maybe somewhere in the middle, you answer to the Archbishop. With many of the same powers as the Prince, the Archbishop is the closest analogue the Sabbat has to that position. An archbishop is different though, in that the Sabbat is less concerned with enforcing their traditions and more concerned with waging its holy war against the antediluvians and everything else. Thus the archbishop is part spiritual leader and part warlord, advancing the sword of Caine's agenda and establishing Cainite primacy. That is a difficult task to undertake, I assure you. It's not simply a question of turning a Sabbat city into a living hell and declaring that vampires rule. The fundamentals of the Masquerade and the sheer weight of the mortal population means that a war is to be waged in stages. Too many Sabbat fail to understand this, especially among the young, and lose faith in their leadership because they're too impatient to play the long game of jihad. This subversion of ignorance is perhaps the Archbishop's greatest challenge to overcome. Like the princes of the Ivory Tower would answer to the inner circle, the Sabbat Archbishop answers to the Regent, which is the ultimate authority over all of the Sabbat, ruling the sect from the Sabbat stronghold in Mexico City. Each Archbishop and Bishop is ultimately accountable to the Regent. The bishops are immediately below the Archbishop in power, and with the same high-level duties but on much narrower scope. A bishop may be in charge of a single aspect of Cainite unlife in the domain, or may be more of a spiritual leader, inquisitor against diabolism, military general, or any other specific aspect of Sabbat agenda. Some Sabbat domains have no archbishop, but are instead ruled by a council of bishops. In a sense, the Priscus is similar to a Primogen, but is never appointed by an archbishop or bishop. The Prisci rise to the rank over time according to no specific criteria. A Priscus politically is an advisor to the local Sabbat authority figures with no formal role in the sect politics, but great practical influence. The cardinals oversee Sabbat affairs in large geographical regions. As the superiors of the archbishops, cardinals coordinate the Sabbat in their cities and direct them in the jihad. Further, it is their direct duty to bring any cities within their territory under the Sabbat's sway. Most Sabbats see their cardinals no more than once per year, if at all, as the duties of the office keep them in constant communication with bishops, archbishops, Prisci, and the regent themselves. The Templars, or Paladins, are the elite force of bodyguards appointed by a bishop or greater leader. Templars serve a variety of duties, always in a martial capacity. Most archbishops keep a cadre of paladins in their retinues to handle delicate matters, best solved by a judicious application of violence. The pact priests bear the responsibility for the spiritual well-being of their pacts. Second in command to the ductus, the pact priest officiates all the rituals observed by the pack and often creates a few for the sole use of the pack. All packs have at least one pack priest, though some rare and larger packs have two. In the event that the ductus is eliminated, the pack priest becomes a temporary leader until a new leader can be appointed by the bishop, archbishop, or, in an autonomous pact, the pack itself. Finally, there is the ductus themselves, who are the leaders of the individual pacts. The ductus attends to the operation matters of their charges, resembling gang leaders or chiefs of small tribes. The title of ductus is largely honorific, according recognition to the most accomplished member of a pack. Of course, some authority accompanies the title, but those who throw their weight around far too much might find themselves staked for the next sunrise. Through all of this, I may have made the Sabbat sound like to you undecisive paranoid children. The reality is that the Sabbat are far more organised than both the Camarilla and the Anarchs. What holds them together is not the facade that you and I have been performing, but the religious zeal to destroy the antediluvians, and by extension, the Ivory Tower, who the Sabbat believe are the mere puppets of the antediluvian forefathers. The Sabbat have, and always will be, a serious threat to the Camarilla. Many a frustrated neonate has openly joined the Sabbat, not wanting to be the plaything of their elders. And let us not forget their beliefs concerning Gehenna. Imagine for a moment that what they say is true, that the antediluvians will rise and drink the world dry. Which of the three sects is most likely to do something about it? In many ways, they are far more practical than both the Anarchs and the Camarilla put together, and when they all band together, I fear that not many kind will be able to stop them. The same can be said for Kindred and Cainites alike. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you will be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.